Hey, what's up guys? Airsoft Man 819 here with another console review. Today's review is going to be on one of my personal favorites, the Sega Dreamcast. This is a very important system in video game history. Even though it was not made very long, it is still quite popular, and games are still being developed for it, even though it's been discontinued for over 10 years. So today I'm going to give you guys my a basic review and my opinion of the system. So I have a list of parameters here. They're on my phone this time, not on a piece of paper. And I'm basically just going to I'm going to browse through these parameters and see how the Dreamcast scores overall. So let's go over the parameters really quickly. Number 1 is size, 2 is build quality, 3 is controller, 4 is third-party software and hardware support, 5 durability over time, 6 innovation, 7 sales, 8 games library, and 9 memory. I might not go through all these in order, but those are the basic parameters I'm going to be using. And my light just suddenly turned yellow. Alright, so the Dreamcast was released in Japan in 1998. I don't remember the exact date. It was released here in the US September 9th, 1999, and was made until early 2001, so very short lifespan. But there was a good amount of... My light just came back. Okay. There was a good amount of games and a good amount of third-party hardware developed for the Dreamcast in its short lifetime. And they're relatively cheap today. So the Dreamcast is a relatively small console, so it scores well in size. It's not very large. It is very hefty, though. It weighs about 3 pounds, maybe 2.5, due to its built-in power supply. You can tell it has a built-in power supply because it takes an AC cord directly into the back of the system, but does not need an AC adapter. It takes a standard power supply cable. I'm sure you guys have seen that before. It's the same cord that boom boxes use and certain appliances use. So yeah. You have your AV out port, which you use this for your AV out to your TV. It uses the standard RCA cables, you know, red, white, and yellow. And it also uses an RF switch box if you have an older TV. And you can always use the VGA box for HD, but that's getting harder to find. You have your internet in. This is the standard 56K modem that came with the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was one of the first systems to take internet right out of the box. It does not take broadband. It takes regular phone line. It's dial-up. You can buy a broadband adapter, but those are not very cheap, and they're not very easy to find. You have the bottom of the system here. Shows the sticker for the manufacturer specifications. This is the number 1 system. There's a number 1 and a number 2. This is the earlier, I think it's the earlier number 1. Was manufactured June 2000. And yeah. Okay. The Dreamcast is a pop-top system, meaning it does not have a motorized disc tray. You have to manually open the system yourself by pressing the open button. You have 2 buttons that are on the top of the system. You have open and power. A very simple design, which I like. You just hit the open button and the tray rises up. Actually, it had a game in here I didn't know of. But yeah, I like systems with the pop top because it's much more durable than the disc tray, because there's nothing really to break. It just snaps closed and opens up like that. Let me get this game out of the way. I did not know that was in there. The Dreamcast uses a standard drive. You just pop the game right onto it. Okay, just like that. The build quality of the Dreamcast feels quite high, very heavy and solid. Nothing creaks. It doesn't feel like anything's going to break. It feels like a brick, so it does well on build quality as well. The format that the Dreamcast uses for games is proprietary to the Dreamcast. This is actually one of the games. This is Sega GT. Uses a GD-ROM, which was developed for the Dreamcast. It's basically a CD, but the pits on the CD are pushed closer together, so you can store more information on a disc. So a GD-ROM will hold about, I think, a little bit over a gigabyte, and a standard CD will only hold like 800 MB, I'm not sure. Okay, so the games came packaged in CD-type jewel cases like this. This is Sonic Adventure. This is the best-selling game on the Dreamcast. Those cases are quite stylish. They're small, they're easy to store, but they're clear and shiny, so they're really easy to scratch up, and they're really fragile. So I'm not too big a fan of the jewel cases, but they look good, at least. So, yeah. So, right off the bat, it scores good for size and build quality. You have 4 controller ports in the front of the system. A, B, C, and D. So you could play 4 players right out of the box, unlike the PlayStation, PlayStation 2, and other systems, and the Saturn. You could actually use 4 players right out of the box, which was a plus. The Dreamcast can also play audio CDs, and I think with a modification it can play VCDs, which are video CDs. The Dreamcast also has its own proprietary controller, obviously. This is the Dreamcast controller. The Dreamcast controller really wasn't that innovative. It really wasn't too much different. I mean, it looks different, but there's nothing really special about it that stuck out, and most people I talk to aren't big fans of this controller at all. For one, the joystick is all plastic. It's quite slippery, and it's not a very responsive joystick. The wire protrudes from the bottom of the controller, so it does get in the way. Sega knew they messed up, so they put this little groove where you could stick the wire, but it marred the wire up. You can see it's like, get the camera to focus, it's marring up the wire, so I don't really use it. It's got this big thing on the back of it that, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. It did include analog triggers, which are very, very nice to have, but that's about the only really good thing about the system's controller that I can point out. Get this VMU out of the way. It has 2 expansion ports. The top one is typically used for a memory card, while the bottom one is used for rumble packs and expansion things and such. It had a microphone you could buy and stuff like that. So I'm not a big fan of the controller, but it works. It's held up well over time, so I really can't complain too much about it, but there's really nothing that innovative about it either. The Dreamcast uses these visual memory units. Yes, mine is broken, by the way. It's missing the back, but mine still works. Sega had a crazy idea for the Dreamcast's memory. I don't understand why they did this because it's kind of stupid. But the memory card has a screen on it, and it has its own D-pad and A and B buttons. And their ideology behind this is that, okay, you're playing games on your Dreamcast. You got this stuck in here, by the way. And the window and the controller is for the screen of the VMU, and while you're playing Dreamcast games, like little images will pop up on this, and in Resident Evil, your health meter is on this. So they had a good idea, but it really wasn't as good in practice as it was in theory. And you could download mini games from the games you play on the Dreamcast to your VMU, and you could take this out and play little games on it, but the games weren't really that good, and this thing took a watch battery that didn't have really good battery life, and you could put 2 VMUs together and trade files, which is pretty cool, but it only holds 200 blocks, so if you have a decent collection of Dreamcast games, you're going to have at least 3 or 4 of these to save all your games. So I'm not a big fan of the memory card, and for memory it does not score that well. The Dreamcast has no internal memory. I think it has some RAM. I'm not sure how much RAM it has, but not much. Alright, so I'm not big on the controller or the memory card, but it was a good idea in theory, but just not as good in practice. Okay, so let me check my parameters here real quick and see what I haven't touched on yet. Third-party software and hardware support. I said in the beginning of the review that it did have good hardware support. There was a lot of companies making aftermarket racing wheels, controllers. Mad Catz was on board. Performance. Third-party hardware was good. Third-party software was not quite as good. Some of the third-party games for the Dreamcast were not very good. Like Test Drive 6 had terrible graphics, and some of the games just weren't that great. But it had okay software support. The hardware support was better than the software. So yeah, let's see what other points we didn't talk on. Games library. For a short period of time that this was made, the Dreamcast had a good games library. I think it had around 500 to 800 games for a system that was made around 2 years. That's actually pretty good. So it scores pretty good with a game library. Durability over time. The Dreamcast does not score well for that. The GD-ROM drive, the laser, has a bad reputation for just breaking. And the Dreamcast's reliability over time really isn't that good. Most people who own a Dreamcast own a backup console for that reason, or they own an extra laser to replace. So it's just not that durable over time, sadly. And sales, the Dreamcast in its first year sold really, really well because it really was unopposed for a while. But Sony did announce the PlayStation 2 sometime in 2000, early 2000, late 1999. And when the PlayStation 2 actually hit the market, the sales of the Dreamcast went straight down, and Sega eventually dropped out of the console market and only went towards software and games development. So sales weren't too great either. As far as innovation is concerned, the Dreamcast was very innovative. It was the first system to have onboard online right out of the box. The memory cards were innovative, even though they weren't too good, they were still innovative. It was one of the first systems capable of full HD. It had the best graphics. It was the best system in the world when it was released. So innovation, it also scores very high. And I do have a high level of respect for the Dreamcast because of how innovative it is. And some people don't appreciate how innovative the Sega Dreamcast is. But I am proud to be a Sega Dreamcast owner, and it is a very good system. But I also have a PlayStation 2, and the PlayStation 2 is pretty damn good too. So this has been my review on the Sega Dreamcast system. If you have any questions about the Dreamcast or any comments on the video, just go ahead and leave those. So yeah, it's a really good system. Too bad it ended the way it did. I wish it would have been made longer. I wish they would have made a second Dreamcast. I believe if Sega did release the Dreamcast 2 now, it would do very well. Just saying, Sega, you should release the Dreamcast 2. They really should. But yeah. There's homebrew movements going on with this thing. You can buy brand new homebrew games for this. You can do awesome mods to it to hook it up to a new LCD TV. So the Dreamcast is just plain awesome. And this has been my review, and thanks for watching, guys.